The evening had started in a calm and gentle way, and no one inside the quiet mountain lodge expected anything unusual to happen. The soft snow outside touched the windows like small white feathers, and the warm orange glow from the fireplace made the wooden walls shine softly. Sandra Bullock stood near the large window, watching the slow fall of snow. The place felt safe and peaceful, a rare break in her busy life. She had come here with a small film team for a short retreat, hoping to rest her mind after weeks of pressure and noise. Keanu Reeves was seated on a couch near the fire, holding a warm cup of tea. He liked the silence of the mountains. He liked how the cold air outside made the inside feel even more comforting. Every time the fire cracked softly, it made the room feel alive. He noticed Sandra standing near the window, and he gave her a small, gentle smile. She returned the smile with a tired expression, as if she wanted to relax but did not truly know how. The rest of the team had gone to their rooms early. It was a long day and people wanted to sleep. The lodge was far from the city and had no distractions. No traffic, no noise, no lights from tall buildings, only silence, snow, and the warm scent of burning wood. Sandra closed her eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. It was the first time in many days that she felt her heart slow down and her shoulders drop. She whispered to herself that maybe this trip would finally help her breathe again. Keanu finished his tea and stood up to stretch his legs. He walked to the bookshelf in the corner and picked up a small lantern that the lodge kept for decoration. Inside, it was a soft battery light, warm and steady. He switched it on and looked around for something to read. But before he could decide, Sandra turned from the window and took a slow step toward him. "You look peaceful," she said softly in a tone that sounded almost surprised. Keanu smiled gently. "The mountains do that. They make everything slow and simple." Sandra nodded lightly. "I missed simple." She did not explain more. She did not need to. Keanu understood. Sometimes silence said everything. They talked for a few minutes about small things. Nothing deep, nothing heavy, just small warm words that made the room feel even softer. But beneath Sandra's calm voice, there was a quiet tension. Something was weighing on her, something she had not spoken about. Keanu sensed it but did not ask. He never pushed anyone. He believed that people shared things only when they felt safe enough. Soon, Sandra said she would go to her room and rest. She walked down the long wooden hallway, her footsteps gentle and slow. Keanu stayed in the lobby near the fire, flipping through an old book with the lantern beside him. The night was peaceful, and the only sound was the wind brushing softly against the windows. But then the unexpected happened. Without warning, the lights throughout the entire lodge flickered once, then went completely dark. The fire was still alive but dim, and the hallways became pitch black. The silence was now heavy and cold, no longer warm. The wind outside grew louder as if it sensed the sudden fear inside the building. Keanu looked up in surprise, holding the lantern closer to him. "That's strange," he whispered to himself. He knew the lodge sometimes had weak power in winter storms, but this time it felt different. The silence after the blackout was too thick, too sharp. And in the hallway, Sandra stopped walking as soon as the light disappeared. It happened so fast that her body reacted before her mind understood. Everything around her turned into darkness. The walls vanished. The floor felt unsteady. Her breathing suddenly became fast and shaky. She pressed her hand against the wall to keep herself still, but her fingers trembled. She had a fear she rarely spoke about, a fear that lived quietly inside her, waiting for moments like this. She hated sudden darkness. It made her chest tighten and her mind cloud over. She tried to tell herself that she was safe, that she was in a lodge with people she trusted. But fear does not listen to reason. Fear does not care about words. It only grows stronger. Her heartbeat echoed loudly in her ears. She whispered softly, "Please not now." But her voice broke halfway. She felt the hallway close in around her, even though she could not see anything at all. She tried to take a step forward, but her legs felt weak. Her breathing turned uneven. She needed light, she needed warmth, she needed safety. And the only person she associated with safety that entire day was Keanu. Without thinking, driven only by instinct and fear, Sandra rushed forward in the dark. She did not know if she was moving straight. She did not know if she would hit a wall. All she knew was that she had to reach the lobby. She had to reach him. Her footsteps echoed through the empty hall, quick and unsteady. The darkness moved with her like a cold shadow. She felt the panic rising with each step. She whispered his name, hoping he could hear her, but her voice was swallowed by the silence. In the lobby, Keanu heard faint steps. They were not normal steps. They were fast and frightened. He immediately stood up, lifted the lantern higher, and walked toward the hallway. The warm glow of the lantern cut through the darkness like a small golden circle. "Sandra," he called softly, worried. And then she appeared around the corner, running straight toward the light. Before Keanu could move or say another word, she ran directly into his arms. Her body trembled against him, her breathing uneven and panicked. She held his coat tightly as if she had been drowning and finally found something solid to hold on to. Keanu froze for a moment, shocked not by her action but by the level of fear he felt in her grip. He gently held her shoulders and kept the lantern steady so the light touched her face. She looked terrified, her eyes wide and unfocused. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked before any word came out. Keanu lowered his voice to a warm, steady tone. "You are safe," he said softly. "I am right here." She kept her face close to his chest, trying to breathe normally again. Her fear slowly began to settle, replaced by the familiar calm of his voice. He did not ask her why she ran. He did not question her reaction. He only held her steady, making sure she felt grounded in the darkness. The fire flickered behind them, and the lantern cast a soft ring of light around their bodies. Sandra's hands slowly loosened as her breathing softened. She whispered a quiet apology, but Keanu shook his head gently. "It's all right," he said in the same calm voice. "Fear chooses for us sometimes." Sandra closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his presence calm the shaking in her chest. For the first time that night, she felt safe. And this unexpected moment marked the beginning of something neither of them saw coming. The lantern light made a soft golden circle around them, and Sandra stayed still for a few moments while her breathing slowly settled. Keanu did not move or speak. He simply allowed her to hold on to him until she felt steady again. His calm presence filled the dark room like a warm blanket. The world outside was cold and silent, but near him she felt grounded and safe. After a while, Sandra gently stepped back, though her hands still held the edge of his coat for balance. She did not want to let go too fast because she feared the darkness would swallow her again. Keanu noticed this and kept the lantern close to her so that she would not feel alone. "I am sorry," she whispered. Her voice was soft and full of embarrassment. "I did not mean to run like that." Keanu shook his head slightly. "You do not have to be sorry," he replied gently. "Everyone has something that scares them." Sandra looked down at her hands. The fear was not fully gone, but she could breathe better now. She wondered if she should tell him the truth, the real reason darkness frightened her so deeply. But she was not ready to open that door yet. Some memories still lived in places she avoided. Keanu did not push her. He only waited, offering a space that felt safe enough for trust to grow. The fire behind them flickered weakly, and the cold wind outside pressed harder against the windows. The blackout continued. There was no sign of power returning soon. The lodge felt unnaturally still, as if the night itself was holding its breath. "Let us sit near the fire," Keanu said softly. "You will feel warmer there." Sandra nodded and followed him. He placed the lantern on a small wooden table so the light could cover the entire area. Then he moved a chair close to the fire and pulled another one beside it for her. The warmth from the flames slowly reached them, giving the room a softer glow. Sandra sat down carefully. Her body still felt a little shaky, and the memory of the hallway darkness kept returning to her mind like a cold shadow. Keanu noticed her tense posture and leaned forward slightly. "Do you want some water?" he asked gently. She nodded. He walked to the small counter at the side of the room and poured a glass using the lantern to guide him. When he returned, he handed it to her slowly as if he wanted to avoid startling her. She took a sip and felt the cool water calm her throat. "Thank you," she said in a low voice. Keanu sat down beside her. "If you want to talk about it, I am here," he said quietly. "If you do not want to, I am still here." His words were simple, but something about the way he said them made her eyes soften. There was no pressure, no expectation, just kindness. Sandra took a long breath. "I do not like darkness," she said at last. "It feels like something closes around me." Her voice trembled slightly, but she kept speaking. "It has been like this since I was a child. It just never went away." Keanu listened without interrupting. He knew that some fears do not come from logic. They come from moments that shaped us long before we understood anything. "Fear does not need a reason," he said softly. "It only needs understanding." She looked at him, surprised by how easily he made her feel normal. Most people responded with confusion or advice she never asked for. but he offered only acceptance. The fire crackled gently, and Sandra pulled the warm blanket from the back of the chair and wrapped it around herself. She felt her body slowly sink into the moment. Keanu's presence felt like a safe place to rest. He adjusted the lantern so the light reached further into the room. "The generator should turn on soon," he said. "These winter storms sometimes cause short outages." Sandra nodded. "I know, I just did not expect it to happen when I was alone in the hallway." Keanu leaned back slightly. "You did the right thing coming here," he said. "You trusted where you felt safe." Her breath paused for a moment. "And that was you," she said quietly. Keanu did not react with surprise. He only offered a small, gentle smile. "Then I am glad I stayed near the fire," he said softly. For a moment, she did not speak. She watched the fire dance and listened to the soft whistling of the wind. Every second made her shoulders relax a little more. After a few minutes, Keanu stood up and walked toward the hallway entrance to check if there was any light coming from the other side. Sandra watched him carefully. The lantern light followed him, creating long, soft shadows that drifted behind him. He looked calm, steady, completely unafraid of the darkness. Something about that steadiness comforted her. "It is still dark," he said as he returned to his chair. "But the wind seems to be slowing down. Maybe that is a good sign." Sandra wrapped the blanket tighter around her body. "I wish I was not this scared of something so basic," she whispered. Keanu turned to her. "You cannot compare your fear with someone else," he said calmly. "Every person carries something unseen." She looked into his eyes and saw no judgment, only sincerity. It made her feel lighter. "What about you?" Sandra asked softly. "Do you fear anything?" He paused a moment, thinking in silence. Then he nodded gently. "I fear losing people I care about," he said in a tone so honest that Sandra felt her heart shift. She swallowed softly. "That is different," she whispered. "That fear sounds meaningful." Keanu smiled. "All fears are meaningful," he said softly. "Even the ones we do not understand. They remind us that we are human." Sandra lowered her head for a moment. She felt a strange comfort growing inside her, something she had not felt in a long time. She realized it was rare to feel so seen without having to explain every detail. The minutes passed quietly. Both of them watched the fire, listening to its soft crackles. Sandra felt her heartbeat return to normal. The weight in her chest slowly dissolved. The darkness outside no longer felt like a threat. It simply existed, and she existed with it without panic. "Thank you for not making me feel small," she said finally. Keanu looked at her with gentle eyes. "You are not small," he replied. "You are someone who went through fear and still kept moving. That is strength." The words touched her more deeply than she expected. She felt warmth in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. It came from his respect. Just then they both heard a faint sound from outside the window. Sandra turned slightly. Keanu stood up again, holding the lantern carefully. "What was that?" she asked quietly. Keanu listened closely, his expression calm but focused. The sound came again, soft and distant, like something shifting in the snow. Sandra felt a small drop of fear return. The darkness outside suddenly seemed alive again. Keanu stepped toward the window. "Stay here," he said gently. "I will check it." She watched him approach the window with steady steps, the lantern guiding his way. The firelight flickered behind him, casting soft shadows on the wooden walls. The suspense grew slowly in the room as the wind quieted, and only the unknown sound remained. Sandra gripped the blanket tighter, her eyes following his every move. Something outside was waiting, and neither of them knew what it was. Keanu stood very still in front of the window, holding the lantern slightly higher so its warm circle of light touched the glass. The snow outside was thick and silent, but something had moved. Sandra watched him closely, her fingers gripping the blanket, her breath soft but not steady. The fire behind her crackled quietly, unable to chase away the tension building in the room. The noise came again, a soft crunch in the snow. It was too gentle to be dangerous, yet too strange to ignore. The lodge was far from the road and surrounded by tall trees. No one should have been outside at this hour, especially during a snowstorm. "Keanu," Sandra whispered, her voice trembling with worry. "Can you see anything?" Keanu leaned closer to the window but did not touch the cold glass. "Not yet," he replied softly. "Let me check the door. Stay here near the fire." Sandra swallowed hard. She did not want him to walk into the dark foyer alone, but she also trusted his calm more than her own fear. She nodded slowly even though her heart pounded loudly in her chest. Keanu walked toward the front door with balanced steps. The lantern light followed him, pushing the shadows away. Every sound in the lodge felt louder now. The wood creaked under his feet. The wind outside hummed softly. Sandra watched the dim hallway behind him, half expecting something to move there too. When he reached the door, he paused. He listened first. The crunching sound stopped. The snow fell peacefully again, quiet as a whisper. Keanu placed his hand on the door handle without opening it. He was steady, careful, completely aware of Sandra watching him with concern. "Maybe it was just a branch falling," he said calmly, though he still kept his eyes on the window. "The storm was strong a little while ago." Sandra tried to believe him. She tried to tell herself that her fear was making everything feel bigger. But something about the silence outside felt too deep, too perfect, like the world had paused to listen. Keanu stepped back from the door and returned to her. When he reached the chairs by the fire, she let out a slow breath she had been holding without noticing. He sat beside her again and placed the lantern on the table. "Everything seems fine," he said in a gentle tone. "But if you feel uncomfortable, we can stay here until the power returns." Sandra nodded slowly. "I do not want to be alone right now," she admitted in a small voice. Keanu offered a reassuring smile. "Then stay close to the fire. It is the warmest place." Sandra looked at the flames. The firelight touched her face gently, but her thoughts were still tied to the sound outside. She wondered if her fear was affecting her judgment. She wanted to calm down, but the earlier darkness in the hallway had shaken her deeply. Keanu noticed the worry still in her eyes. "You do not have to pretend to be okay," he said softly. "Fear does not disappear quickly, it takes time." His words felt like a soft blanket over her thoughts. She was not used to people understanding her without needing long explanations. She felt something inside her chest loosen slightly. After a few quiet minutes, Sandra spoke again. "Thank you for coming to check," she said. "I know it might have been nothing, but I just feel on edge tonight." Keanu nodded. "Fear changes how we hear the world," he replied. "It makes small sounds feel big. It makes simple things feel heavy. It does not mean you are weak." The sincerity in his voice made her eyes soften. She found herself studying his face in the warm lantern light. He looked calm, steady, protective. She wondered how he managed to remain so grounded. He seemed like someone who carried storms inside him but learned how to walk through them with quiet strength. "You always stay calm," Sandra said quietly. "How do you do that?" Keanu looked into the fire for a moment before answering. "I try to stay present," he said. "Fear grows when we imagine what could happen. Calm grows when we stay with what is happening." She let his words sink in. They made sense. They felt simple but powerful. "I wish I could do that," Sandra whispered. "You can," Keanu replied gently. "You already took the hardest step. You faced the darkness and came looking for safety. That is strength." She lowered her head. It did not feel like strength. Keanu leaned slightly closer, his voice warm and steady. "Strength is not how you look. Strength is how you choose to keep going even when something scares you." Her breath trembled, but in a softer way now. She felt something shift inside her. This was not just comfort. It was understanding. It was respect. It was something rare. Suddenly, a faint vibration shook the floor under their feet. Sandra jumped in her chair, pulling the blanket tighter. Keanu placed a calm hand on the arm of her chair. "It is okay," he whispered. "That is the generator." A moment later, soft humming began somewhere in the basement. Then a few dim lights blinked on along the ceiling. The lodge returned to life with a gentle glow. Sandra let out a long breath, her shoulders relaxing. "Thank goodness," she said softly. The generator lights were not bright, but they made the shadows smaller. The fear she had carried since the blackout began slowly faded. Keanu smiled. "See," he said, "a little light changes everything." Sandra nodded, but her eyes drifted back to the window for a second. She could not forget the sound outside. The snow was calm now. The darkness looked quiet and innocent again, but her mind still remembered the movement. "Keanu," she said gently, "what if that sound was not just a branch?" Keanu followed her gaze toward the window. "We will check in the morning," he said. "Right now it is too cold and too dark to see anything clearly." Sandra agreed. Part of her still felt uneasy, but being near him made her steady. She listened to the fire, the generator, and the slow wind outside. The night was still strange, but not as frightening as before. Keanu leaned back in his chair. He kept his eyes soft and his voice low so she would feel safe. "Do you want to tell me what happened to make darkness so hard for you?" he asked, gently. Sandra hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the blanket. The memory she had buried for years began to rise slowly like a shadow moving toward the light. She took a soft breath, then another. She looked at Keanu's calm expression, and something inside her trusted him enough to speak. "It happened when I was little," she whispered. "A night I never forgot." Keanu nodded slowly, giving her all the time she needed. And Sandra finally began to tell him the story she had avoided for years, not knowing that sharing it would open a door neither of them expected. Sandra held the blanket tighter as the fire warmed her hands, but the memory she was about to share felt much colder than the night around them. Keanu stayed silent, watching her with steady and patient eyes. He did not rush her. He did not lean forward. He simply stayed present, creating a safe space with nothing more than kindness and calm attention. Sandra took a slow breath. "I was about 7 years old," she began. Her voice shook slightly, but she did not stop. "It was a stormy night, very much like this. The power went out in our house. Everything became dark, and I remember hearing things I could not understand." Keanu nodded gently, encouraging her to continue. "My parents were not home," she said. "They had gone out for a dinner. I was with a babysitter who was new and did not know what to do when the lights went out. She panicked faster than I did. She kept saying strange things to herself. She tried to open the front door to look outside, but the wind pushed it back. She started crying. I had never seen a grown-up cry like that. It scared me even more." Sandra paused and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory pass through her slowly. Keanu waited, giving her all the time she needed. "She left me in the hallway while she tried to find her phone," Sandra continued. "But she had left it in her car. She went outside to get it even though the storm was strong. I remember standing there alone in complete darkness, and I could not hear anything except the wind and the sound of branches hitting the roof." Keanu lowered his head slightly, listening with full focus. "She did not come back for almost an hour," Sandra said quietly. "I thought something had happened to her. I could not see anything around me. I could not move. I felt trapped inside the dark. I cried until my voice hurt, and that night never left me." She opened her eyes. They glowed softly in the lantern light, filled with a mixture of fear and relief. Speaking the memory did not erase it, but it made it less heavy. Keanu reached out his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he placed his hand gently over hers. She felt the warmth immediately. It grounded her in the present, pulling her away from the shadows of the past. "You were a child," Keanu said softly. "You were not meant to face something like that alone." Sandra nodded. "I still remember the exact feeling of that darkness. Even as an adult, whenever lights go out suddenly, my body reacts before my mind can think." Keanu's voice stayed calm. "Your fear makes sense. Your mind learned to protect you. But tonight you did not freeze, you moved. You reached out for safety. That shows how much stronger you have become." His words were simple but powerful. They touched her deeply. She felt a warmth rise in her chest, a warmth that came from being understood without judgment. For a moment the room felt peaceful again. The fire crackled softly. The lantern glowed warm. The faint hum of the generator filled the silence just enough to make the lodge feel alive. But the calm did not last long. A loud creak echoed from the far side of the hallway. Sandra jumped slightly, pulling the blanket up to her chest. Keanu turned his head quickly toward the sound. The hallway lights were dim but stable. Nothing moved. Keanu stood up slowly. "I will check," he said quietly. Sandra immediately shook her head. "No, wait," she whispered. "What if it is something outside again?" Keanu gave her a reassuring look. "I will stay close to the light," he said. "I will not go far." She wanted to protest, but the look in his eyes made her trust him. He carried the lantern and walked toward the hallway entrance. His steps were calm and steady, but his attention was sharp. Even he felt a shift in the air. The creak had not sounded like simple wood movement. It felt heavier, more intentional. Sandra watched him carefully. Her breath stayed shallow until he reached the corner. "Keanu," she called softly. He stopped and turned to her. "I am right here," he said gently. "You are not alone." Those words soothed her immediately. He stepped into the hallway, holding the lantern forward. The light stretched down the wooden floor and touched the nearest door. All the doors were closed. The hallway was completely still. But the silence felt different now, heavier, as if something had moved and then stopped. Keanu checked the main switch box near the storage room. Everything looked stable. He adjusted one of the hallway lights, making sure it was secure. Nothing seemed broken or unusual. But as he turned back toward the lobby, he noticed something on the floor. A small patch of melted snow, fresh snow. He stared at it for a moment. The snow was only in one spot, as if someone had stepped inside the hallway recently. But the front door had not opened. He had been near it the entire time. He would have heard it. Keanu crouched down and touched the wet spot with his fingers. It was cold. Very cold. He looked toward the side hallway that led to the back door of the lodge. That door was rarely used. It was supposed to stay locked during the winter because the snow piled high outside. Yet something about the melted snow made Keanu feel uneasy. He stood up slowly, not wanting to frighten Sandra, and walked back to the lobby. When he returned, Sandra looked up immediately, searching his face for any sign of danger. He sat down beside her again, placing the lantern on the table. "Everything looks fine," he said softly, choosing his words carefully. "But I found a little snow on the hallway floor." Sandra's eyes widened. "Snow," she whispered, "inside." Keanu nodded gently. "It might be from someone's shoes earlier. Maybe someone from the team walked through before going to sleep." His voice stayed calm, but Sandra felt a small wave of fear rise again. "Did you hear the back door?" she asked quietly. Keanu shook his head. "No, and the back door is usually locked at night, but I will check it later when the storm settles." Sandra held the blanket tighter. The room felt warmer than before, but her mind felt cold. Keanu noticed her worry and leaned closer. "Sandra," he said softly, "I will not let anything harm you. You came to me because you felt safe. That means something. I will stay here with you until morning." His voice was steady and sincere, and it made her feel calmer. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not want to face any darkness alone tonight." Keanu smiled gently. "You will not." They sat quietly for a moment. The fire warmed their faces. The generator lights hummed softly. The wind outside was calm again. But Sandra could not shake the feeling that something had changed. Something outside the lodge had come closer. Something had left that small mark of snow. And whatever it was, might not be finished yet. The fire glowed softly, filling the room with warm orange light, but Sandra could not stop thinking about the small patch of melted snow Keanu had found in the hallway. The thought circled in her mind again and again. Someone had been inside the lodge after the blackout. Someone who left snow on the floor. Someone who moved quietly enough that neither of them heard a thing. Sandra pulled the blanket closer, her fingers shaking slightly. Keanu noticed and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Breathe slowly," he said in a calm voice. "Nothing will happen while I am here." His words were steady, grounding her again. She nodded even though fear still lingered in her chest. The generator lights flickered for a moment, dimming the room before brightening again. Sandra froze instantly, her eyes wide. Keanu gently rested his hand on the table, ready to steady her if she panicked. "It is normal," he said softly. "Generators sometimes fluctuate. It is still stable." Sandra inhaled carefully. "I trust you," she whispered. Keanu nodded with a gentle smile. "Good, you are safe." But while his voice was calm, his mind stayed alert. He could not forget the fresh snow. He had checked the back hallway quickly, but he had not opened the door to look outside. It was too dangerous in the dark, yet something inside him kept repeating the same thought. Someone was out there. Or worse, someone had come inside unnoticed. He did not want to frighten Sandra further, so he kept that thought to himself. Minutes passed slowly, each one filled with tight quietness. Sandra stared at the fire, trying to focus on its glow. Keanu stayed beside her, watching the hallway from the corner of his eye. Suddenly, Sandra spoke, her voice soft and uncertain. "Do you think someone else from the team might be awake?" she asked. Keanu shook his head. "I checked the main hallway earlier. All the room doors were closed, and everyone said they were going to sleep early." Sandra looked around the room, her expression tight. "But what if someone woke up because of the blackout?" she whispered. Keanu thought about it. It was possible. But the snow mark was too fresh, too isolated. If it had been an earlier footprint, there would have been more melted spots. "I will check again soon," he said, "but let us wait until the wind settles completely. The storm is calming." Sandra nodded slowly, trusting him. To distract her, Keanu asked gently, "Do you want to sit closer to the fire?" She moved her chair slightly forward. The warmth touched her legs and arms, easing her tension a little. Keanu sat beside her, keeping the lantern between them and the dark hallway. For a moment, the silence felt peaceful again. Then a sudden soft thump echoed from the back hallway. Sandra gasped and grabbed the arm of her chair, her heart racing. Keanu quickly placed a steadying hand on her forearm. "It is all right," he said, though his eyes narrowed with focus. The thump had been real, not imagined, not wind. Something had shifted. Keanu stood up. Sandra instantly shook her head. "Please do not go," she whispered. He leaned closer to her. "I will not go far," he said. "I just need to listen." She watched him take 2 slow steps toward the hallway. He did not move into it. He only stood at the boundary where the lantern's glow touched the floor. He waited. Sandra watched his stillness, admiring how calm he stayed even in moments like this. The thump did not repeat. Instead, everything went silent again. Too silent. Keanu stayed there for a long moment, his eyes scanning the shadows. Once he felt sure nothing was moving, he stepped back to Sandra's side. "It might be the heating pipes," he said softly. "Sometimes they make noise when the temperature drops." Sandra tried to believe it, but her fear still clung to her. "It did not sound like pipes," she whispered. Keanu knew she was right. He had heard the sound clearly. Pipes did not make a heavy thump like that, but he needed her to stay calm. "We will check it in the morning," he said. "Together. Right now the safest thing is to stay here near the fire." Sandra nodded slowly. She trusted him even when the fear still lingered. To help her relax, Keanu pulled another blanket from the side shelf and draped it over her shoulders. "Warmth helps steady the heart," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "You know everything," she whispered. Keanu laughed softly. "I know a few things," he said, "mostly how to stay calm when someone else is afraid." Sandra looked at him for a long moment. His gentle face, his steady hands, his quiet strength. She felt a deep sense of comfort. Something inside her began to shift in a way she could not describe. "You have been kind to me tonight," she said softly. "More than I expected, more than you needed to be." Keanu shook his head. "Kindness is never more than needed," he replied. "It is the least we can give each other." Her heart softened at his words. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, different from the fire, something deeper. She was about to speak again when the generator lights flickered once more. This time, the flicker lasted longer. The room dimmed, darkened, then brightened again. Sandra tensed up instantly, gripping the blanket tightly. Keanu reached out and placed his hand gently on her back. "It is okay," he whispered. "The generator is just adjusting." She nodded, breathing slowly. But at that exact moment, something moved outside the window. Keanu saw it first, a dark shape shifting near the edge of the snow, not close but not far, definitely not a tree. His eyes sharpened, his hand stiffened slightly on Sandra's back. He did not want her to see it yet. But Sandra followed his gaze, and her breath caught in her throat. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice breaking, "is someone out there?" He could not lie, not after she had trusted him so deeply tonight. "Yes," he said in a calm, steady voice. "Someone is outside." Sandra's fear rose quickly. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Keanu kept his tone gentle. "I do not know yet, but listen to me." He turned fully toward her, his eyes focused and sincere. "I will not let anything happen to you." His voice was firm, strong, and full of unshakable assurance. Sandra felt tears gather in her eyes, not from fear alone, but from the comfort in his voice. The dark figure outside shifted again. Slow, quiet, intentional. Something was approaching the lodge, and neither of them knew why. Whatever happened next would test both of them more than they expected. The dark figure outside the window moved again, just slightly, but enough to make Sandra pull the blanket tightly against her chest. Her breathing grew shallow, her eyes fixed on the snow beyond the glass. The warm room suddenly felt colder. The fire still burned, but the light did not reach the fear rising inside her. Keanu moved slowly, placing himself between Sandra and the window. He held the lantern in one hand and kept the other slightly raised, ready to steady her if she panicked. He did not show fear, not because he felt none, but because he knew she needed his calm more than ever. "Stay close to the fire," he said softly. "I will check." Sandra grabbed his wrist without thinking. "Please do not go outside," she whispered. "Please stay." He looked at her gently. "I will not go outside," he said. "I promise, I am only checking from here." She slowly loosened her grip, though her hand trembled. He placed his hand over hers for a brief moment, offering silent reassurance. Then he turned toward the window again. The shape outside remained still for a while. Then it shifted backward, almost melting into the snow. The lantern light was too dim to reveal details. It could have been a person. It could have been something else. Maybe fear was making the shadows seem more alive than they were. Keanu watched for a long moment. When the shape did not return, he lowered the lantern and stepped back toward Sandra. "It is still there, is it?" she whispered. Keanu took a slow breath. "It moved away," he said, "but we need to check if the back door is locked." Sandra shook her head instantly. "Please, no, please do not leave this room." Keanu looked at her for a moment. She was frightened, tired, and vulnerable. Pushing her now would only make her fear worse. He sat beside her again and placed the lantern on the table. "Then we stay here," he said gently. "Nothing outside can harm us. We are inside, safe, warm, and together." Sandra exhaled shakily. His presence alone felt like a shield around her. She watched the fire, trying to steady her breathing. Keanu placed another small piece of wood in the fireplace, and the flames rose gently. Minutes passed. Neither of them spoke. The silence was not empty. It was steady, grounding, filled with a quiet understanding. Keanu kept his eyes on the window and the hallway, alert but calm. Sandra watched him more than the room. She noticed how steady his posture was, how balanced his breathing remained, how he held fear without letting it take over. Finally, she whispered, "How are you so calm even now?" Keanu looked at her with soft eyes. "Because you are scared," he replied, "and someone has to stay steady." His voice felt like warm water on a cold night. It eased the tension in her chest. The generator lights flickered again, but this time the flicker was softer. Sandra tensed for a moment, then relaxed as Keanu placed his hand gently on her arm. "See," he whispered, "still here, still safe." Sandra nodded slowly. "You make everything feel safe," she said in a small voice. He smiled. "That is because you are not alone." The fire crackled gently, and Sandra felt her heart slow its pace. She rested her head lightly against the back of the chair, still wrapped in the blanket. But then something unexpected happened. A sudden knock echoed from the back door. Sandra's eyes widened in pure fear. She covered her mouth with both hands to stop a sound from escaping. The knock was soft but clear, not wind, not imagination, a real knock. Keanu stood slowly, placing himself between Sandra and the sound. His hand rested lightly on the table as if steadying himself for whatever came next. He was calm, but Sandra could see tension in his jaw. "Stay here," he whispered gently. She grabbed his arm. "No, please do not go," she whispered again, her voice shaking. Keanu crouched beside her and spoke softly. "I will not open the door," he said. "I just need to see." Sandra's fear battled with trust, but trust won. She slowly let his arm go. He gave her one last reassuring look, then walked toward the hallway with the lantern. Sandra waited, heart pounding loudly in her ears. Each step Keanu took felt like a long moment. She watched the shadows move around him as he walked toward the back of the lodge. When he reached the corner, he stopped. He listened. Sandra could not see him now, but she felt his presence in the silence. Another soft knock. Keanu raised the lantern, letting its glow reach the back door. Then he leaned closer. Sandra pressed her fingers to her lips, trying not to cry. Finally, Keanu spoke. "Who is there?" he asked calmly. A shaky voice replied from behind the door. "Please, I need help." Sandra froze. It was a young man's voice, frightened, weak. Keanu kept his tone steady. "Are you hurt?" "Yes," the voice said. "My car slid off the road. I cannot feel my fingers. I have been walking in the snow looking for any light." Keanu paused. He turned his head slightly, thinking. He looked down and noticed more snow melted near the doorway. The earlier mark he saw was not from someone hiding. It was from this person seeking warmth. Sandra listened closely, her fear slowly blending with confusion. Keanu stepped closer to the door. "I will open it slowly," he said. "Stay where you are." The voice replied weakly, "Thank you, please." Keanu opened the door just enough to look outside. The cold wind rushed in for a moment. On the ground near the step was a young man, shivering hard, snow covering his shoulders and hair. He looked exhausted, barely able to stand. Keanu gently pulled him inside and closed the door behind him. The young man collapsed to his knees, his hands red from cold. Sandra stood up, startled by the sudden shift in the situation. Her fear of the unknown melted into concern. Keanu supported the man and guided him toward the fire. "Sit here," he said gently. "Warm your hands slowly. Do not put them too close yet." Sandra stepped forward, her instinct to help rising above her fear. "Is he all right?" she asked quietly. "He is freezing," Keanu replied, "but he will be okay." The young man looked up with tired eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "I saw the lights and hoped someone was here. I did not know what else to do." Sandra offered him her blanket. "Take this," she said softly. He hesitated. "I cannot take your blanket." She placed it around his shoulders gently. "Yes, you can." Keanu watched the two of them, relief softening his face. The fear that filled the room only minutes ago had turned into something else, something warm, something human. Keanu brought the man a cup of warm water. "Drink this slowly," he said. "Your body needs it." The young man nodded gratefully, taking small sips. Sandra looked at Keanu, her eyes soft and full. "You helped him so quickly," she said. Keanu shrugged lightly. "Anyone would." She shook her head. "Not everyone," she whispered. The young man finally looked up fully, his voice steadier now. "I was so scared," he said. "I thought I would not make it to morning." Keanu placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You are safe now," he said. The man's eyes grew emotional. "Thank you, both of you." Sandra smiled gently. "You are not alone, we are here." The fire warmed all of them. The generator lights glowed softly. The fear of moments ago transformed into relief, gratitude, and quiet connection. Sandra sat down again, her breath finally calm. Keanu sat beside her, their chairs close. She looked at him with a deep softness. "You kept me safe," she whispered, "even when I was terrified." Keanu shook his head gently. "You came to me because you trusted me," he said. "That means more than you know." Her eyes softened. "I ran into your arms without thinking," she said quietly, "and your reaction surprised me." Keanu smiled warmly. "Your fear was real. I wanted you to feel safe, that is all." Sandra felt a warmth rise inside her chest, gentle and deep. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu looked at her with quiet kindness. "Always." The young man by the fire looked at them both with a small smile. "You two saved my life tonight," he said softly. "I will never forget this." Sandra and Keanu turned toward him, smiling back with warmth and respect. And in that quiet lodge, with the fire glowing and the worst of the night behind them, they all felt something simple and powerful. Kindness, respect, safety, and the quiet strength of being there for one another when it mattered most.